Peggy, tell me what happened in the woods that night that Michael went missing. Officer Darrell Edwards asked the disheveled convict. Well, I guess I'll start from the very beginning with the car ride up there. Michael was the only one vaguely listening, but I was bored out of my mind and I quickly changed the radio to one with some pop music. And I must say, I looked pretty good with my braided blonde hair, my light pink t-shirt and my jean shorts that revealed the length of my tan, smooth legs. What can I say? I really liked Michael. I had youth on my side, and nothing Michael's wife would ever be able to let him experience again, which is a shame. You know, he still loved her. He just no longer had the desire to be with her on long weekends. But Michael was my boss. He was a mid-40s plastic industrial entrepreneur with a business he had gotten from his dad, which he had also gotten from his dad, and so on. He also had a wife at home taking care of their 2 teenage daughters. He was a good guy, but, well, he had a penchant for beautiful blondes with straight skirts and tucked-in blouses, and I appreciated the no-strings-attached relationships with an older gentleman. Keep in mind, I'm barely above 25, and I really enjoyed those getaways he invited me to. Last time, he had flown me up to Atlantic City, and he paid for everything. Besides, why would I really care about his wife? It wasn't like she owed me anything. And Michael was old enough to know what he was doing was shitty, and he was still doing it, so there was probably something wrong within his marriage anyway. Get to the point. Tell me about the cabin, Peggy. Officer Darrell interrupted her. It was a nice rental, recommended by several friends and colleagues, and I had to admit, I always had a soft spot for nature. I think Michael knew that. So when Michael invited me for my weekend away, I couldn't find it in myself to say no. So a little over 3 hours later, under the burning sun of Ohio, we finally reached our destination. And I was quick to get out of the car and grab my backpack before Michael led me to the building where we were to discuss the rental arrangements. After being given a map and pointed out the path we had to take, we were then warned of the 45-minute hike we would have to do to get to our cabin. And they also told us about the benefits of having no neighbors, and a lot of extra marital innuendos were thrown into the mix. The guide briefly warned us about a spirit of the lake, but we didn't really bother listening. And I mean, why would we? We never believed in any of that crap anyway. I mean, listen, this is right outside Waterloo, Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. I'm sure they told everyone for some sort of marketing gimmick. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 20 minutes of hiking in, and Michael looked like he was about ready to die. His cheeks were flushed blood red, sweat had his shirt sticking to his skin, and he was panting like a mad dog. However, despite his obvious difficulties at keeping up with me, he looked quite happy that my pink shirt was drenched in spots he never expected anyone to sweat. And he also looked at me thinking that I didn't notice his lingering gaze. You know, we really did like each other. And I was jubilant despite the heat, and I wanted to make sure he knew I was having a good time. And keep in mind, he was paying for everything. The least I could do was remind him just why he was paying for everything. And as the guide told us at the rental place, the hike to the cabin took at least 45 minutes. When we arrived, Michael wanted nothing more than to shower and relax, but I wouldn't have it like that. I promised him the hike to the lake would be faster and that the water would be even better than the shower. And according to the map, the lake was only about 10 minutes away from our cabin, and all I had to do was pout a little, and he was ready to give me the world. Wiping his forehead with a clean towel, he told me that they were going to the lake. After around 6 or 7 minutes of hiking, I can't remember, Michael started panting again, already showing signs of exertion. The heat was crushing, and even I was sweating like crazy. Now, Michael wasn't really out of shape for a man his age, but maybe he should have done a cardio session or two before offering a hiking weekend in the woods in Ohio. But still, I was pleased that he was willing to go so far for me. And a smirk curled my lips before I extended my arm to share some water. I remember telling him, "You gonna survive, old man?" And he hated when I called him an old man. And as always, his masculinity forced him to do something really, masculine. Something like him pushing me against the tree and asserting his dominance. And I chuckled lightly and pushed him back, saying I really wanted to swim in that clear water. I watched his smile stretching as I told him I had forgotten my bathing suit, and his eyes lit up like fire. I loved seeing how much impact I had on him, but now wasn't the time for flirting. There was a lake waiting for us to enjoy. "Peggy, can we skip all the flirting and bullshit, please? Get to the story," Officer Durrell commanded. Fine. We finally reached the lake, and as expected, it was like a mirror. Not a single breeze to caress its surface, and the horizon revealing a blurry background where the sun and water met. There was an optical illusion that made it look like heat off the asphalt, distorting the trees and the other side of the lake. It was hot. No, it was hotter than hot. However, the setting was absolutely stunning. Gorgeous trees, big rocks along the shoreline, a few birds in the sky, and the reflection of it all on this natural mirror. I told him, "I'm going in." I didn't wait. My enthusiasm got the best of me, and I dropped my backpack to the ground. In a matter of seconds, I had my bottle of sunscreen in hand, and half my clothes were discarded. I was telling Michael to hold the bottle. I stripped the rest off and then innocently asked for help to lather it on. Michael didn't need to be told twice, and he put his hands to work almost instantly. And once he was done, I thanked him and then proceeded to rush into the water, not without giving him the incentive to follow, of course. The water was as refreshing as I expected. It felt like fresh silk caressing my skin, gliding along the length of my body, and wiping away all those little sweat drops that gathered all over me. I dipped my head underwater and opened my eyes, but quickly closed them. The water stung, a bit like chlorinated water in public pools. It was strange, but maybe there was just something in my eyes. And I tried again, but it still burned. So I decided against opening my eyes underwater, despite how clear the lake looked. And seconds later, a loud scream escaped me as something brushed my thigh. And I yelled at Michael, "You idiot! Don't scare me like that!" Michael, whose face was finally losing some color as he was getting refreshed, was laughing hysterically at my reaction. I splashed him and he splashed me back. And when we finally stopped, he got closer, wrapped his arms around me and kissed me. And then, all of a sudden, a maddening, deafening scream resonated right next to my ear, and I kicked Michael away and rushed to the shore, frustrated. Was he mocking me? What a good way to ruin a perfectly sensual moment. It was only when Michael limped his way out of the water as fast as he could that I realized he wasn't mocking me. On his leg, a patch of skin the size and shape of a hand disappeared. Right beneath the knee on his calf, it looked like his skin had been burnt, which was impossible considering he was underwater a second ago. Maybe he was allergic to something in the water. So I said, "Michael, I'm so sorry. I thought you were mocking me." Michael groaned in pain as blood started to drip from the strange burn wound. His blood was almost black as it dripped, and on its way down his leg, it seemed to burn him even more. I quickly pulled out my water bottle and washed away the wound before finding my shirt on the shore, and I used it to wrap around his leg. "We need to get that treated. We need to get back to town," I told him. I was no doctor, and some Walking Dead knowledge of how to bandage a wound was definitely not going to help him. Before Michael can explain that he could not walk, there was a guttural, visceral groan that alerted us that we were not alone anymore, and I turned my head slowly, only to see something crawling out of the lake. It was gray, a disgusting, decaying flavor of gray and flesh swollen with water. I could see a patch of skin dangling precariously from the monster's open left cheek, which revealed part of its jaw, in the absence of gums, and teeth that probably been diseased far beyond the subject's death. I retched painfully as the stench of algae and rotting flesh filled my nostrils, and Michael was the one who managed to help me tear my gaze away from the creature. Michael pulled my arm and I helped him walk. We had clothes back at the camp. The ones on the beach could easily be discarded and forgotten in favor of saving our lives. "Peggy, alright, I'm gonna stop you right there, Peggy. I don't care about your clothes. Tell me, how did you get back to the cabin?" Officer Durrell chimed in. Well, Michael and I only took the time to put our shoes on as fast as we could before rushing into the forest. But as we ran, I noticed how black my pink shirt was getting. Michael's blood was turning into a sort of gooey black liquid and was quickly soaking through the fabric. He was getting much paler too, and I was worried he wouldn't make it. Behind us, the Walking Dead corpse of a drowned old man trying to drag us to the bottom of the lake, and in front of us, a 45-minute hike with a guy bleeding faster than he can breathe. We did not have many options, but we knew we couldn't stay here, and so I figured it'd be best to try to get back to the cabin. And with newfound strength and adrenaline pumping fast through me, I found the strength to carry Michael to safety. His lips were nearly blue by the time we reached the cabin, but I didn't have time to take care of him. I dropped him on the couch with a water bottle and an orange and took measures to secure the cabin. Doors and windows were locked, and furniture was pushed in front of them to make sure the cabin could be our impenetrable fortress. I mean, listen, I had seen too many apocalyptic zombie scenarios played out on TV to believe that crawling, disease-festering sack of rotting human flesh couldn't break through a window. Considering what he had done to Michael's leg, it was a priority that I secure the cabin. Once I was done, I returned to Michael, who seemed to be feeling a little better. He had eaten the orange and drank some of the water and was now taking care of his leg with the first aid kit. I hadn't even noticed him leaving for the bathroom as I was frantically moving everything about to lock the doors. As I was about to check on him and ask him how he was feeling, our unwanted guest finally made itself known. Groans spilled from its skeletal mouth as swollen fingers raked against the door, scratching and clawing. I swallowed heavily and then stared at Michael. And I wondered if he could turn into something like that. I mean, like I've said, I've watched a lot of zombie movies. Could he turn into that? In all apocalyptic movies I had seen, including Resident Evil and The Walking Dead, the guy who bled was usually the guy who turned. For a moment, I debated offering to chop his leg off. but the thought of having to deal with so much blood and actually cutting through human skin had me feeling nauseous. The monster kept clawing incessantly at the door while its moan filled the cabin. There'd be no sleep that night, and even as the sun started to descend and the creature of the lake started thumping its fists at the windows, it didn't tire. For hours it just tapped on the window until the sun was completely out. And then all of a sudden, it simply broke through the goddamn window with renewed strength. I screamed as it started clawing at the curtains and trying to push the furniture, blocking its way. I had already looked around the cabin twice to find an axe or something we could use to fight it, but to no avail. It was forbidden to cut trees because, well, according to the guide, it was forbidden to do so in this particular state park. The hardest thing I had to fight the monster was a plastic flashlight or a can opener. And this definitely wasn't going to be enough. Unfortunately, I had to think fast because the deeper into the night we were getting, the stronger it seemed this creature became. Michael, who had regained control of his leg and reduced the bleeding, suggested we break a chair and try to bash his skull with it. And I asked him how he planned to break a chair leg when all they had were those cheap plastic and metal chairs with legs made of steel. And keep in mind, this happened all so quick, and we were shouting at each other. Michael realized in horror that without tools, we wouldn't be able to break our chairs. And I gave him the flashlight, and in my peripheral vision, I saw something on top of the refrigerator. It shined, and it looked like a piece of glass. I picked it up, and I quickly realized it was a bit of glass from the refrigerator shelf. Someone must have broken the shelf and just left a large chunk of glass on top of the fridge. So I quickly wrapped part of it in my shirt, so not to cut my hands. And at this point, the gray, moaning, slimy mass of monster had Michael pinned to the ground, and every time the creature would touch him, I could smell burning flesh. I ran at the grotesque thing and jammed the glass into the creature's back. It groaned and sneered at me with a rotting grin, its green eyes piercing my soul, and I was instantly terrified. Michael, at this moment, took the metal first aid kit and smacked the creature in the face. The monster seemed to be stunned by this, and I took another stab at the creature, this time in its side. It screamed a scream, so horrible and loud, so penetrating, that I thought my eardrums would burst. It twisted and turned in agony, and it took another look at me, and it ran back out through the window. I looked at Michael, and each spot the monster's hand had touched him left him with a burn mark that bled thick black goo. It looked like oil, and as I got closer I realized I had to do something or else Michael would die. Michael's eyes were swollen. His face was starting to swell too, and his skin was reeking of decay and death. There were little white blisters all over his body. And I looked at Michael, and I said, "You're going to die. You're going to die here tonight. Michael, I'll try to make you comfortable, but you should try to find some peace." And so he just passed away. Just like that? Officer Durrell questioned Peggy, who was now in tears. "Yes, just like that, he stopped breathing," Peggy responded. "Peggy, that was a truly fascinating story. but we found burns all over Michael's body. Well, yeah. The monster burned him every time it touched him. Peggy looked up expectantly. Peggy, why do you have sodium hydroxide or lye in your backpack? And why do the other inmates call you SilentTorture? Officer Durrell questioned her. I make soap in my free time. Listen, officer, if you don't believe me, spend a night or two at those cabins in Waterloo. Swim in that lake and piss off that dead, bloated creature. And see what happens to you.